Get 12 weeks of The Spectator in print and online for just £12. And we'll give you a £20 Amazon gift voucher, absolutely free. Go to spectator.co.uk/voucher.
Hello and welcome to Spectator's Book Club podcast. I'm Sam Leith, literary editor of The Spectator, and this week I'm very excited to be joined by Annie Nightingale, who is the first female DJ in Britain, the longest serving employee of Radio 1. She is MBE, CBE, BBC. She's the queen of it all, and her new book is called Hey, Hi, Hello, which has, I think, the friendliest title of any book we've yet had on this podcast. Annie, tell me what you were trying to do with this memoir in particular, because it sort of goes through the story of your life a bit, but you've written about your life before. What's this one doing that's different, that's expanding it?
Right. Well, yeah, I've written an autobiography before. This is not an autobiography. This is about 50 years of pop culture. And the thread it starts in 1970 when I began with Radio 1. So that's where it starts. And then right up to now, up to Billie Eilish in 2020. So there's a lot of material, interviews and with people I've met along the way, and a lot of them have never been printed before or ever appeared outside of bits of it appeared on, I might have appeared on radio, TV. So there's a lot of material to put in to tell the story over that. So, the first interview, Mark Bolan, and then, it kind of travels through the music as the music's progressed over the years. But there's some my ventures as well. So things like I was in LA when the riots happened in 1992, and that was very interesting. So part of the story told by a guy who's a DJ, but was a firefighter when that was happening. So there's this story in there. There's the story of a helicopter pilot who was purely a music lover, and he went out to buy a Patti Smith record, ended up going to the Royal Navy recruiting office. The next thing he knew, he was in the Falklands, in Carlos water, being fired at right in the middle of the Falklands War. And his story, I think, is very interesting. And that it actually connects with Elvis Costello's story of shipbuilding, one of the greatest popular songs of the 20th century, in my opinion, which was about the Falklands War. So there is serious elements, and there's some very fun ones as well. So I hope it's done that has come across. It's like if you and I went out for the evening and it went on and on and on, this would be the kind of area I hope we would cover.
Good. Well, I would love to be able to do that. The podcast isn't quite long enough, but music's been a kind of passport for you to all these different areas of life, these different people. You seem to have known absolutely everybody. I said the book's got this very friendly title. You talk in the book about how when you're broadcasting, you're basically trying to phone your best friend up and say, have you listened to this? This is the most amazing song. In a world which is quite often quite tribal, quite bitchy, you don't seem to have made a single enemy. Is that a kind of conscious strategy, or are you just incredibly nice?
Maybe we should put it out there and say, right, hands up, who hates Annie Nightingale? I'm sure there'll be a few. I avoid the trolls on social media, because if you appear on TV, then you find out what people really think of you. And it's usually not very pleasant, because a TV sits in a room and we all sit in judgment and go, oh my goodness, hasn't she aged? Or worse to that effect. Or they can't stand your voice. You can't expect to be liked by everyone. And now I've had my share of it. I think some story appeared a few weeks ago. I think it was about Desert Island Disco, actually, and in the Mail on Sunday. And you look at the comments, there you'll get it. Like, I can't stand this woman. And another one said, the woman that ruined the old grey whistle said. So yeah, they're out there, believe me. But maybe you don't bump into them too often.
But you seem to have a gift, at least, for staying on the right side of your interviewees. You say that, one of the things that helped you really early on was that you were friendly with the Beatles, but also, in order to stay friendly with them, they had to trust you, yeah? I mean, did that cut across a bit? Because you were a journalist, working journalist at the time.
Yeah, there was a very big dilemma. So this is Apple days, and John Lennon had met Yoko Ono and was seeing her, etc. And the press didn't know. And I was in a difficult position because if I had loyalty to the newspaper I was working for, then I should have spilt the beans. But there's no way I was going to do that. I felt I owed the Beatles a lot more than the Daily Sketch or whichever one it was, or Daily Express. I used to write a pop column for them, and I felt, but what I was afraid of, I thought, this story's going to break, and they will think it's me that's broken the story, and that'd be awful. But it wasn't me. So when they went public, I said, thank goodness for that, because now, the story was out there. But I realised at the very, very beginning that I was never, ever cut out to be a real hard news journalist. I haven't got the bottle, basically. And being a feature artist, if you like, or music critic was what I really liked doing, given the opportunity. So I was chicken.
Actually, working as a journalist was what got you in the position, wasn't it, to start doing what you love, which is sharing music. I mean, is this kind of extraordinary thing that you campaigned to have a female DJ at Radio 1, and they eventually went, okay, how about you? I mean, it's almost as if you took an opinion columnist and made them prime minister or something.
Oh, don't tempt me. It was a way in, and I'd been turned down for years simply because I was a woman, and I was a breathtaking sexism. In all the years, I'd done quite a lot of TV presenting by then, and worked on magazines and newspapers and whatever, and had not actually experienced any sexism. I often be the only female in the office, but that was not a problem. Enormous fun, and I always say that working on the Brighton Evening Argus was my university, and the wit would be flying across the room. It was all terrific fun. So I was quite used to being a solo woman. I thought nothing of it. To me, it wasn't about gender, but so suddenly hitting this wall of resistance from the BBC, I was gobsmacked. I said, well, why? What has being a woman got to do with it? And then they come out with this amazing line and saying, because DJs are husband substitutes, which still makes me, I can laugh about it now. But I think the guys that were running the station at the time saw the DJ as being a very techie thing, and they actually used to say, why would a woman want to be a DJ? And my answer would be, because it's the best job in the world. My MP, Karen Buck, Westminster North, says, I did get to know, one day she's quoted, being asked if she hadn't become an MP, what would she like to do with her life? And she always says, she ought to be me. So I got to know her, and I invited her around Radio 1. I said, come and have a look at the studio. So it seems to be a job that people now do seem to share in my enthusiasm. But the weird thing is that having broken down that barrier, it was 12 years before there was another female DJ. And that really surprised me. And then I thought, well, maybe I am the freak and that no one else wants to do this. I mean, I will never know how many applied and maybe rejected. I have no idea. They don't tell you things like that.
You say in the book that even now, the kind of list of the top 50 earning, superstar DJs around the world now, the kind of David Guetta's type figures, there's still very, very few women on that list.
Well, yeah, there's a difference, obviously, a massive difference between being a radio DJ and being a live DJ doing clubs and festivals and stuff like that. And that is where that still the massive barrier is. With radio, things have got a huge amount better. Radio 2, who were at one time quite resistant to having women on, we've now got Zoe Ball doing the breakfast show. You've got Sarah Cox in Drive Time. You've got Joe Wiley. So 3 ex-Radio 1 people who are now in very prominent positions. And on Radio 1, you've got Clara Anfo, who is really, really, who's on in the morning on Radio 1, really making a huge impact, particularly in the Black Lives Matter arena and all of that. She's become a real force to be reckoned with, and quite rightly. And there are a lot more women on Radio 1 than there ever been. I mean, it hasn't quite reached parity, but it's much better than it ever was. The live circuit thing, yeah, is still very dominant. I mean, there's women that I support who you've probably never heard of, people like Alice in Wonderland, who's actually Australian, based in LA. She does pretty amazing stuff. Has had quite a lot of success in America more than here. So they're out there, but there aren't that many of them. And that is a shame. Obviously, a great shame, but I can't tell you exactly why. There's still a bias against them.
To go back to your own experience, though, as you say, 12 years before there was anyone else there, you'd got through the initial, you said, there's great sexism, great resistance to you coming into the station. But once you were there, what was your experience? I mean, was it a very laddie culture, you know, among the DJs in Radio 1?
Well, yeah, it wasn't so much to them, it's the engineers. Because in those days, you'd be in the studio and there'd be technical operator through the glass. So that was your immediate audience. And they were a bit like subs, you know, in Fleet Street, who I'd had that experience. And even, you know, as a journalist, when you were phoning, copying, and people would say things like, much more of this rubbish is there.
I've had that too.
Kind of experienced all that in Fleet Street. And probably just as well, because, you know, some of these guys would actually not like what you were doing or say something critical. And you're thinking, I put my heart and soul into this show, into picking the music, and here's somebody dissing it straight away. And so I felt very much the woman driver. I felt very much that they were waiting for me to fail, make mistakes. And there were a lot more mistakes to make in those days. When it's vinyl, you know, you could play at the wrong speed, 45 instead of 33, play the wrong version, the album version with all the swearing on it by accident. And I got to the point where they thought I'd do it deliberately, playing, you know, on naughty tracks. But half the time it was a mistake. So on the very first show, I stopped the record that was actually being broadcast. It was 8 seconds of dead air, which is like a lifetime. And I thought, well, actually, I've blown it on the first show. But they obviously forgave me for that. But I was terrified for several years. Not about the talking bit, not about choosing the music, but the technical side of it, because it's very intimidating atmosphere where I felt I'd got so much to prove. I wasn't that bothered about being slick, you know, being a slick DJ. But the impression was that it was more important playing the jingles at the right time and hitting the news, that side of it, which I just wanted to play the great music and talk about it. I mean, thank goodness for John Peel, because, you know, he wasn't, I think he wouldn't ever mind me saying so. He should be allowed to make mistakes as well. But he was a bloke and he played football, you know, so proper bloke. And so, I mean, the other DJs, they were fine, but they were all getting on with their own lives. It was very, very competitive. And they were competitive between each other rather than me. I mean, I wouldn't say they thought I was irrelevant, but as long as I didn't kind of steal their slot or something.
You're all right.
That was what mattered. It was, you know, where you were in the schedule, who had this slot, who had that slot. And that is what they were competing with each other about. And so I wasn't quite that bothered that, well, you want to be on air. And the best decision I made was to go from daytime to the evening, because I realised that daytime, it's playlist. And in a way it has to be, otherwise it would be complete chaos. But in the evening, the DJs play their own music. And that is what I wanted to do. And the whole point of it, I didn't join Radio 1 to be a celebrity. I wanted, because I had this thing, enthusiasm about playing a piece of music, playing it down the phone to your friend and going, hey, I think this is great. What do you think? It's that simple.
Now, you mentioned John Peel, actually, Princess. I mean, you were obviously friendly with him. There's a piece in the book where you talk about, you know, a very fond recollection of him. How did you respond when, in the last couple of years, the Me Too movement started going, look, actually, some of his sexual behaviour wasn't okay. His wife was 15 when he married her. He boasted about sleeping with underage groupies. Did that make you reevaluate your feeling towards him?
I don't think so, no. It wasn't something you'd go up and talk about and say, hey, did you sleep with underage girls? I mean, it's, as you kind of wouldn't say that to a colleague and stuff. And I didn't know him back in those days. It wasn't my experience to know what had happened to him in his youth. No, not really. But he's very, very, very much a family man. When I knew him, he had 4 children, very devoted to Sheila, his wife. He seemed to be, have a perfectly great family.
As you say, you did the music. Here's some new music, listen to this. And that's been your kind of catchphrase. Now, one of the things that's kind of extraordinary, I remember having, as a student, 25 years ago, your Annie on One compilation. And,
yeah.
And, adoring it, think, oh, God, it's fantastic. This Weekender, it's got Daft Punk before they were famous. It's got, and realising, of course, at that time, you would have been in your late 40s. And yet there you were at the absolute cutting edge of electronic dance music, championing early David Bowie, you were championing the Beatles. Many of us, seem to go, the music we loved when we were teenagers, that's what we'll be aware of new stuff, but, I probably can't listen to much that's later than the Pixies these days, but you haven't had that. You still seem to be as excited about new music. There's no sort of age or generational thing, in a way that obviously we know radio audiences are very generational. How is that? Why is that, do you think?
Well, I don't know. My dad, he would be listening to pirate reggae station when he was 80-something. So he was a radio enthusiast, and so maybe I got it from him. And you're absolutely right. Music to most people, pop music is about their late teens, but your youth and that time. And as life goes on, you become less interested. That is the norm. Other things take over. More important thing for me, that didn't happen, and I can't tell you why. I mean, that compilation, Annie on One, I have to say, that did change a lot of things, because you do go in and out of fashion in this world. And at that time, the late 80s, probably the only time I thought, should I carry on with doing this? And then Acid House came along and rave came along, and that I was completely transformed by that. And so I met Jeff Barrett, who runs Heavenly Records, and that compilation turned everything around. And suddenly I was cool again. I couldn't hardly believe it. But because we'd chosen the right music, which I believed in anyway, but the way it was presented, it just changed everything. It really did. And I was reborn through that music. The 90s was very special. And obviously, I'd been through the 60s where I thought, this is great, but hang on, it's not your party. This is not your generation. Sorry. But they were very inclusive. They'd say, no, come on in. They were very warm, generous people at that time. So I was kind of accepted by all of those people. And suddenly I was like DJing at very cool clubs, which I would never have expected to happen.
You mentioned that your son was sharing a flat with someone in Primal Scream as well.
Well, he was the manager. He and they were very influential in that. And funnily enough, it's Primal Scream's daughter, Dee Dee, who was a 13-year-old, who told me about Billie Eilish, because they're family friends and so on. But I was living in Brighton too, which is a very hub. Brighton was very actively involved in that whole Acid House scene. So that's partly why I became involved. But yes, obviously, family connection. And it was clear to me straight away that this was very, very exciting. And this was a music revolution and a social revolution. And I think people now realise that the 90s were very special. And obviously, I had experienced in the 60s. It was a bit unfair to have a second bite of the cherry, but they allowed me in.
Yeah. Now, that album does have a kind of punning title. Is it Annie on One or Annie on One? Did you get involved with the drugs as well?
If I did, I wouldn't be telling you.
Ah, fair enough. I have to ask, Annie, because you have that passage about John Lennon saying, Well, if someone asks, I'll tell them the truth.
Yeah. But he didn't work for the BBC, did he?
That's true. That's true. Well, we'll move on. You're a scholarship girl to school. You're obviously very well read. You know, you talked on Desert Island Discs about wanting to take Catch 22 and your enthusiasm for Shakespeare. Are lyrics important to you when you're listening to songs? I mean, do you respond to songs like poems?
In this book, there's an interview with an earliest with Mark Bolan, which is actually very funny. But interestingly, in this interview, in the book, he says it's about getting the melody. And he said, find an interesting subject and keep repeating it over again. And he said, well, you know, the Beatles lyrics aren't that interesting. It's always the melody that counts. And I think there are three elements when you listen to something new, which is, I know within 10, 15 seconds if it's going to work or not. And nowadays, you have got to have that hook really early on because you've got to grab people really straight away. And people send you tunes and say, what do you think? And there's a really good bit right at the end. And you go, why don't you put that right at the beginning? Grab people's attention straight away. So it's actually all those things. It's the rhythm and the beat and the melody and the lyric. They all have to work. And there's been one tune that I've been going on about since the pandemic, which sort of, I don't know where it went in the chart thing, because I don't tend to look at that very often. But I persuaded Radio 1 to put it on the Best Weekend record. Then it went on what's called a C list. Then it went on the B list. And it was by two guys called Sub Focus and Wilkinson. And it was called Just Hold On. And it had a female vocal. And it just summed up how we were all feeling, which is, we have lost so many, but just hold on, and it really touched me. And I persuaded a colleague on KCRW station in LA. I said, see whether you think, again, it's that thing about, I think this has got something, what do you think? It's something like that it sums up what is going on. And obviously what is happening now, as we're X number of months into all this, is that the known lyricists like Mike Skinner, The Streets, and Eminem we're beginning to hear the music or the lyrics about what we're going through. And I obviously find that very interesting. And grime is about lyrics, and a lot of it's very nearly poetry. So yes, it's very important, but you've got to have the tune as well. That's the whole magic, and the beats. Those three elements, I think, you have to have that.
In the book, you talk to Elvis Costello about shipbuilding, and he says something in that, like, I think I've never written a better lyric.
Well, exactly. I mean, that to me, that summed up that period, the Falklands War. There's a transcript in the book of an interview that I did with him about that song, or it was called "Is It Worth It?" about was the Falklands War worth it? It was a documentary made by BBC Scotland, looking at the whole, the morality, and saying, well, whether you believe that the Falklands War is right or wrong, the shipbuilders, the shipyards were going out of business. Here is, they're building new ships for a new war. Is that right or is it wrong? So that's why Elvis Costello come from a shipping family. I don't mean that owned them, quite the opposite. So he said seafaring was in his family. So he put a kind of moral question on that, which is a very interesting angle, and made you think about that in a very different way. And very beautifully sung by Robert Wyatt. I mean, it was stunningly special to me, something like that. And they don't actually, they very rarely become number one. They don't become necessarily big hits, but they're important. And things like Spasticus Autisticus by Ian Dury. You can say quite serious things in pop songs, but not everybody's going to enjoy it.
One of the really kind of intriguing things you drop in the book is to say that astronomy is one of your big things. And I was kind of intrigued by you saying Catch 22 was your favourite novel, and intrigued by the discovery that you're a secret astronomer. I mean, how did you get into that?
At school, a very good physics teacher, and I got very interested in eclipses. And I would, as a child, go outside, look at the stars at night, and think, how can anything go on forever? What is beyond space? What is beyond when is time begin? That whole thing. And I think most people have that as well. I cannot settle the fact that I don't understand infinity. I obviously haven't got the brain power to understand. What I'm hoping is, as the human race evolves, our brains get bigger, and that more people will be able to understand the concept of infinity. So that is a thing about space. I find it very romantic. I love the idea that radio waves, you do a radio program. How do you know where it's going? Is it going to reach, some weird little planet somewhere? I know it's kind of ridiculous, but I am fascinated by astronomy and the moon and the tides, and I think we know so little. If my maths had been better, I would have followed it more strongly, but I was let down by the mathematical side.
Well, you'd have to consult Brian May, who's sort of in your world, isn't he?
And he went to the school next door to mine, not at the same time, but he went to Hampton Grammar, which is next to my school, which is called Lady Eleanor Hollis. Funnily enough, I mean, different years, so I didn't meet him then.
Parallel lives. Looking back, to do this book, you were revisiting your younger self, often quite literally, on these old tapes. I mean, there's a lovely description of you trying to decode an interview with Bob Marley with his music playing in the background.
Yeah.
But, how do you feel re-encountering your younger self? One of the things that comes through is you keep saying, oh, I had a terribly posh voice then.
Well, yeah. Interestingly, Dusty Springfield, who's also another, I think, was very much later in her life. I mean, very late in her life interview. So I very prized that interview. That she said that before she even became a singer or anything, she did very well in elocution. That she was like fourth in England. I mean, I'd had elocution lessons. Why, I don't know. My parents decided that was important, and so I did speak very, very clearly. But people's accents change over time extraordinarily. I noticed Prince William, who's I think is actually a natural broadcaster, because I've seen him on Zoom, and he's really good at it. And I'm going to go right off the point. I'm going to forget what we said now. But when I got the MBE, you're not supposed to speak to the Queen first. But I was thinking, well, she must be so bored, blah, blah, blah. Have you come far? All that stuff. So I thought, well, I'll say something first, just say something that might interest her. So I said, I'm a DJ at Radio 1. And I said, by the way, your grandson, Prince William, when he was on his gap year in Chile, I think they did some kind of press junket thing, and he was seen DJing, so he obviously had a go at that and enjoyed it. And so I said this to the Queen. I said, your grandson really enjoys DJing, maybe he wants to be a DJ. And she said famously one word to me, which was probably. That was it. That was the word. And you're not supposed to speak to her first. I did. So did Nick Grimshaw, who's on Radio 1, is a great friend of mine. But in terms of posh voice, Prince William talks much more unroyally. It's to do with the vowel sounds, and it wasn't a kind of, oh, I'm going to be unposh. But yeah, there was obviously an element of that, because all of us, I think our voices change over the decades. When you hear old BBC announcers and all the A's turned into E's, and experience, and they talk completely differently, laughably. I find them quite comical, but I think all of us, our voices change over the, you don't talk like people did in the 1950s, if you like. It's quite, that's why I love watching old documentaries and hearing how people spoke then. I think it's an evolve. It wasn't a kind of, oh, I have to fake now. I mean, I talk the way I'm talking to you now. Yeah, actually, I did get attacked by the Daily Mail once for clipping vowels. So you can't win, you're either too posh or you're not posh enough. So, for some people, playing the take back of the Bob Marley, I was aware that I did sound, very Newsnight, if you like.
Now, someone, I sort of just end by saying, someone who's obviously loved and embraced and enthused about music in so many genres, from, early rock and roll to blues to reggae to rave. Is there a sort of heartland for you, do you think? I mean, is there a sort of like, you've done all your shows, you come home, you're settling down on the sofa, what sort of music will you be turning on?
I get asked this question. I am downloading new music all the time. I haven't got time to listen to, unless, say, someone wants a playlist put together of, say, right, give us 10 tunes from the late 90s. Okay, that's fun to do. But actually, there's so much to listen to that you'll never, ever get it done. And so I would feel guilty. My pleasure is finding new music. It's not a sort of a thing you do half the time and then go and listen to. It's full time. It's absolutely full time. And I'm happy to do that, because if I was listening to something I already know, well, I already know that. I've heard that. So I want to hear what I haven't heard yet. I want to hear, as John Peel used to say, you want to hear something you've never heard before. That is the quest all the time. And the only thing I might go back to is old comedy, funnily enough. That might be a bit my if I have a moment of not listening to new music, because you after a few hours you've got to make sure that you're giving it your all, because otherwise you're not being fair to the person who's made that tune. I've got very odd taste in comedy, but that is my recreation, if you like. Sometimes it's comedy.
What's your odd taste?
And I love Frankie Boyle, and I love Nish Kumar. That's my other thing is a very strong political comedy. The darker, the better. That's my, if you like, my entertainment.
Well, long may the quest for the next big thing continue. And Annie, thank you very much for your time. Hey, Hi, Hello is out, I think, now.
Audiobook as well.
Excellent. Read by you?
Yes.
You can get the book and hear the ABBA story. It's worth it.